Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Infernal Justice by Ryder O'Malley, narrated by Lance West. 1. Coffee. If there wasn't a cup on the table in 3 seconds, today would be the day I destroy mankind. Let the countdown to supervillainy begin. 1. 24 hours of ensuring the city's heroes didn't die had taken its toll. 2. Our so-called saviors were no help as they destroyed everything in their path. 3. 1 cup of liquid death for you. Griffin set the cup on the table, and it looks like it couldn't come soon enough. To this day, I have no idea why we started coming to the hideout as part of our morning ritual. The coffee shop served as a hub for the community. While not exclusively gay clientele, the owner, Chad, and his husband didn't hide their relationship, and other gay men took notice. Now you couldn't throw an espresso cup without hitting a gay hipster on a coffee date. Alejandro bit into his avocado toast, but that didn't prevent him from speaking. He did that thing again? What thing? I asked, knowing full well I wouldn't like the answer. 3 sets of eyes fixated on me. Bernard leaned forward, placing one of his massive paws over my hand. Xander, were you plotting the destruction of mankind again? No. The coffee burned, almost stinging my tongue, but I didn't care. After a night of keeping patients from crossing the threshold to death, it had worn me raw. It would probably have been smart to skip breakfast with the guys and head home. But they'd all agree. Sometimes I'm too stubborn for my own good. Definitely destruction of the world, Alejandro said as he shoved the last bite into his mouth. Is there a coffee equivalent to being hangry? Congry? As usual, Alejandro rambled, no longer taking part in the actual conversation. He could be flighty, but he was also one of the funniest people I had ever met. Give him a minute, and he'll come back to the conversation with something outlandish that would cause everybody to pause and chuckle. Bernard, on the other hand, didn't have a humorous bone in his body. The man woke up serious, as if the guilt of the world rested solely on his shoulders. It was part of why we never made it to a second date. It also didn't help that when it came time for one of us to mount the other, we realized that tops make terrible bottoms. Thankfully, a night of awkward sex didn't diminish a long-standing friendship. Rough night? Griffin asked. And then there was Griffin, the newest acquisition to the group. Geek extraordinaire and overly nice guy. Everybody at the table would agree that I had a bit of a temper issue. I liked to think of Griffin as the counter to that. He was generally mellow, and the only things that ever got him excited were art and comics. Oh, and supers. The doctors of disaster struck the financial district. There was no way to hide rolling my eyes, so I let those whites shine brightly. 3rd-tier villains who somehow scored a shipment of vaporizing tech from the Beneathian aliens. It was chaos. Huffy, Alejandro blurted out. He's huffy. Bernard spat his coffee into his cup. Griffin's lips curled as he fought off a laugh. Even as I shot daggers at each of them, they burst out laughing. Okay, I had to admit, maybe, once in a great while, I got huffy. It came with seeing the worst mankind had to offer. This was the reason I came to breakfast with these 3 every morning. They served as a reset, a reminder that not all of the universe burned in a horrible train wreck. As you were saying, Bernard hid his smirk with a cup of coffee. It started at the banks. At that hour they're closed and only have electronic security. No big deal for me. But then they moved on to some research labs on the east side. There were night crews working and things got messy. Who saved the day? I admired Griffin's naivete, no lie. He truly believed that superheroes flew in, saved the day, and the world went back to normal. It wasn't just him. Most of the normal people thought the heroes were these godlike saviors. No, for those of us on the front lines dealing with the fallout, we knew the truth. Superheroes were just as bad as the villains they fought. You mean, which superhero used his flame abilities and left a man with second-degree burns? Or which set of laser eyes caused a floor to collapse, trapping 3 inside? Griffin leaned back in his chair, painfully aware he had struck a nerve. I didn't hate superheroes, though he might argue that fact with how I spoke about them. I hated that they came in, beat up a bad guy, took a few photos, offered a few quotes for the magazines, and then left. Behind them, death, destruction, and paramedics like me get to see the victims after each battle. I ground my teeth at the thought. I should see to the victims, but as part of the Super's emergency medical services, the only patients I could treat were the supposed heroes who saved the day. Bitter? Who, me? Sorry, apparently I'm huffy. I don't want to harp on your personal hygiene. Alejandro grabbed one of my hands, holding my fingers upright. But what have we told you about blood at the breakfast table? Normally, I'd wait till I got home to scrub away the filth, but a rebar spike had impaled Heron. His wings or forearm blades were no match for hemorrhaging and blood loss. This is where my team came in, the Hero Brigade. Somebody in the government thought the lives of heroes were more important than that burn victim or the people under the rubble. Instead of saving average humans, I was tasked with saving people with abilities. Like I said, it was a long night. I stared at the red under my nails. I didn't need to check the Hero app to know there was a big black shield next to Heron's name. He hadn't survived the ride to the hospital. Topic switch. No medic enjoyed talking about a call where they lost the patient. So, Griffin, getting railed regularly? Alejandro's eyes lit up. Leave it to our resident sexpert to jump at the opportunity. Is Sebastian a post-sex cuddle covered in cum kind of guy, or does he instantly need a shower? Now it was Griffin giving me a death glare. Nothing swapped topics faster than bad dates and horrible sex. But when those weren't available, talking about Griffin's hunky boyfriend was a good filler. I hate you, he mouthed. If he's doing it right, there shouldn't be a mess. I nearly choked on my coffee as Bernard offered his personal insight. He had a knack for injecting his dry wit at the best of times. I eyed the bearish man. I might need to revisit my aversion to taking cock. Alejandro held up a finger at Bernard. We're going to revisit your etiquette in the bedroom, you nasty bear. First, Griffin, we're dying to hear. Out of nowhere, Chad stood at the table, pouring a cup of coffee, setting it in front of the man. Leave him alone. We already know he's a shower in the morning kind of guy. Xander, how about you tell us about that fling you were parading around last week? Griffin gave the barista a high five. Well played, Chad. Well played. He was the unofficial 5th member of the Breakfast Club. His ability to appear whenever a cup ran dry or when the conversation turned toward dating and sex bordered on supernatural. He's ancient history. Truth be told, he had texted asking if I wanted to get together again. He was a sweet guy, which in my world spelled disaster. Sweet men weren't the type to put up with my collection of baggage. Alejandro raised an eyebrow. You know you can go on a second date with a guy and not get married, right? It might do you some good to have somebody to come home to. Great. I was getting dating advice from a man who struggled to remember the name of the last superhero he rode like a nickel steed outside of the drugstore. Okay, I think we've had enough discussion about my love life. Alejandro turned to Griffin and continued grilling him about his new boyfriend. Bernard, however, leaned onto the table. His twitching mustache gave away the impending sagely advice. Out of this crew, he balanced out our overly emotional responses with a calm demeanor. His eyes softened as he reached under the table, resting his hand on my thigh. He gave it a firm squeeze. "I think a second date is exactly what you need." That was easier said than done. 2. "I'm not going to watch them die!" Leigh grabbed my arm. Her brow wrinkled as she prepared to deliver a sarcastic comment for violating the administration's rule book. She proved herself to be a superb partner in the truck, and I couldn't think of many medics I'd rather have at my six. But when it came to the primary people we were directed to help, she listened to the bigwigs. I, on the other hand, cared more about saving lives. "If they write you up again, the goddamn bridge is collapsing. There are people out there." I knew she was waiting to save a fallen hero, but how could she ignore the panicked screams? While Leigh could sit in the ambulance and watch innocents plunge to their deaths, my training took hold. I shoved the passenger door open and jumped out. We had arrived on site to provide medical attention to Dr. Arcane and his mystics. A portal on the far side of the bridge had opened, and out poured a small army of golems. These magical creatures had been created by some evil villain, but it was up to the Doc and his sidekicks to stop them. Nowhere in the expectations did it say, "Do not destroy the bridge into Vanguard City." I followed the massive cable on the side of the bridge until I discovered the problem. The thinner wires connecting the bridge to the suspension cable had severed, torn away, and now more threatened to break. With a volley of fireballs, the heroes annihilated the front row of the muddy beasts, but the explosions rocked the bridge enough that a chasm formed. While they prepared their next spells, the crack widened, cars falling into the river below. People leapt from their vehicles, running away from the growing hole in the middle of the bridge. It would only be a matter of minutes before the center of the bridge collapsed. "Help!" The meek voice barely rose above the bolts of pink lightning thrown by Dr. Arcane. Jogging toward the hole, a cubbish man caught me by the arm. "Leave it to the heroes." His glasses were bent, nearly obscuring the cut above his right eye. "The bridge is collapsing." He was a thick man, dare I say chubby. If he hadn't tried to prevent me from doing my job, I might have offered to buy him a coffee. I yanked my arm away. "I know, asshole." Picking up the pace, I reached the edge of the expanding hole. Asphalt continued breaking away, toppling hundreds of feet into the icy river below. Dr. Arcane should have turned his attention to the civilians, the people unable to protect themselves. Instead, he showed off for the public, giving his ego a sloppy hand job. "Help!" A dark blue car jerked as the road under the rear wheel crumbled. The door had been dented, hit with enough force it trapped the driver inside. No thinking, just acting. I ran, grabbed the door handle, and lifted with all my might. Even the frequent trips to the gym hadn't given me enough strength to tear the door from its frame. "Don't leave me!" His eyes were desperate, pleading with me not to abandon him. Reaching for the pocket on my thigh, I fished around for the cold metal. "Turn your face away." He listened without question. Gripping the utility tool, I smash it against the window. "Can you climb out?" "My seatbelt." I don't need to hear the end of his statement. I smashed the glass, clearing enough for me to lean through the window. "Thank you." He's terrified, his voice trembling like a man about to die. I flipped the tool around, snaking it between his waist and the seatbelt. It took a few jerks, but I tore through the fabric. "Climb," I barked. He pulled himself through the window, trying to avoid the remaining glass. The moment I could get my arms under his armpits, I carried his weight, dragging him free of the car. As soon as he hit the asphalt, he was crawling, scurrying to his feet, and bolting away from the car. His car groaned as the asphalt gave way. I tried to jump, but it was too late. I was going down. My fingers slid along the road, trying to find anything to slow my descent. Just before I plummeted downward, my fingers dug into a crack in the pavement. Hanging hundreds of feet above the river, I tried to count my blessings. The hole continued to expand, and it was only a matter of time before I fell through the air. I was only a few feet from reaching the surface of the street, but it might as well have been a mile away. Swinging my weight, I grabbed onto a piece of rebar. No matter how hard I swung my leg up, I couldn't pull myself any higher. Hanging, minutes from death, I should have assumed that it'd be a superhero that did me in. I'd cursed Dr. Arcane as I plummeted into the water below. All that time spent at the gym, building muscle to back my mouth, none of it could have prepared me for this. Switching my weight to my other hand, the fatigue set in. Already, my body grew heavy, and I struggled to maintain my grip. A hand shot over the edge, fingers digging into my wrist. I was glad to see there was another person out here with a moral compass pointing north. Another hand joined the first, grabbing me by the back of my uniform, pulling me upward. It wasn't a graceful rescue, but it was enough that I could get my leg onto the pavement and roll away from the hole. From now on, I'd do pull-ups at the gym. The road continued to break apart, but for a second I was safe. My savior fell back on his butt, gasping for air. When I looked up, it surprised me to see the man from earlier, the asshole who warned me away. "Surprised?" he asked between gasps. "Yeah, I am." I got to my knees, scrambling to get away from the hole as the ground lurched. "You looked like you were having so much fun." "Great, a comedian." I got to my feet, holding out a hand. With a grunt, I pulled the large man to his feet. Inches from my face, he didn't hide his smirk. Great, he knew I owed him my life, and I had a feeling he'd make good on that debt. "Aren't you supposed to be the one saving lives?" I debated jumping through the hole. Death couldn't be more grating than his attempts at humor. The witty banter is best left to Dr. Arcane and his henchmen. "You didn't see? They had to fall back. It's an all-alert invasion now. There are heroes out here I've never even heard of." This would have been like Christmas for Griffin. He was constantly asking about the heroes I got called to save. "We need to get out of here." Scanning the bridge, I couldn't see any more civilians. Had they all gotten away? Had the new wave of supers saved them? It was the two of us that needed to get to safety before we became another superpowered casualty. I jerked away when he tried to grab my wrist. His head tilted to the side, offended I didn't let some stranger grab at me. The big guy might be cute, but not so much that I wouldn't lay him out flat. A cable snapped, flying overhead before the bridge shifted. "Run!" He was already bolting into a sprint when I finished the command. I was many things, but fast was not one of them. Before we had gone 100 feet, I daydreamed that I had let go of the rebar and plummeted to my death. I wouldn't even run toward cake. "What's that?" He slowed to a saunter, pointing toward the divider that split the lanes on the bridge. I had a moment to inspect the sky. The golems weren't the problem anymore. Harpies soaring through the air had taken priority. The fight had started with Dr. Arcane's magicians, but it had grown in scope, and there must have been 100 heroes shooting lasers, summoning lightning, or hammering flying demons with their fists. "Medic, give me a hand!" I stumbled forward as a harpy shot upward, striking a winged hero. The two barreled toward the bridge, trading blows with neither getting the upper hand. In the middle of the carnage, it was impossible to tell if the good guys were winning. Having destroyed the bridge into the city, no matter who won, the normal folk were losing. The man didn't slow despite the chaos, moving toward the side of the bridge where piles of cars had been flipped. I was about to yell for him to keep running toward safety when he barked, "There's somebody alive!" I had been a medic for years, and as long as somebody still had a bit of fight left, it was my job to make sure they didn't die before we reached the hospital. Then it was up to the doctors to fix the problem. "I don't recognize him." A man with a jetpack flew overhead, grabbing a harpy by the wings as I slowed my pace. I reached the man, and, true to his word, a green man, no, alien, was lying on the ground, one of his 4 arms stretched out. I didn't have my emergency bag, so I'd have to do this old school. "Is he one of the good guys?" I ignored the question. It wasn't my place to assign good or bad. It was inconsequential to my job. I pushed aside my personal feelings as I dropped to my knees next to the alien. They weren't as common as terrestrial heroes, but I had treated my fair share in the back of the ambulance. "You need to run," I barked. "I'm not leaving." "No," I growled. "I need you to tell my partner I need her. She's waiting a ways up the bridge. Big white box truck. Go! Now!" He hesitated, eyeing me. I appreciated he was willing to stay in the middle of a shit show to see this through. When the apocalypse stopped, I'd be sure to find him. I owed him my life. "Aiden," he said. "Aiden Scott." "Thank you." With a salute, he turned and bolted. I had to admire his ass. It looked rather tasty as he dashed off. I rested a hand on the alien's neck. His pulse was bounding, thumping from a familiar 2-heart gallop. Okay, so far not a corpse. The hero's eyes were almost serpentine, yellow and narrow. I pulled a penlight from my pocket. With a click, I checked his eyes. One pupil blown, no iris to be found. Damn it, if he's herniating, I'd be carrying a corpse to the truck. Explosions. I dropped onto all fours, covering the alien as a car launched upward. The heat washed over my body as debris skid along the street. I imagined dying in the line of duty, but it wasn't going to be today. Not because a bunch of second-rate heroes couldn't stop a simple alien invasion. The harpies were scary, but I'd gladly punch the winged hellbeasts. However, in the middle of the road, a shadowy figure stood. Its lengthy arms hung below its knees, black fingers dragging along the pavement. It'd be ominous on its own, but as its body jerked as if staving off a seizure, I fought to control my bladder. Staring in my direction, I swore the beast grinned. "God damn it," I growled. "We're screwed." 3. The shadow didn't run so much as stalk forward. Its arms went out wide, preparing to lunge if I ran. I couldn't outrun molasses, let alone a supernatural creature. The alien grabbed onto my wrist, and I stole a glance at the agony written across his face. "Don't die on me now." Other than an extra set of appendages, he didn't appear to have any weapons. Scouring the ground for a weapon, I reached for a tire iron. It wasn't nearly as impressive as the 10 smoky blades attached to the shadow's hands, but it would have to do. "I'll be right back." Maybe. My fingers tightened on the piece of metal. If I could get close enough, perhaps duck under its hands and strike upward, I could impale the creature. Leaning forward, I charged, preparing to stop short, hopefully out of reach of its hands. A simple fake and misdirect. The thing couldn't be that smart. Evil shadow monsters were dumb, right? As I stopped short, hoping I gauged its striking distance correctly, it surprised me with a swift turn. With one arm stretched out, it batted at me, and into the air I sailed. Smacking asphalt, I rolled to my knees, praying it didn't take up the chase. Instead, the thing laughed. It stopped when the back end of the ambulance slammed into it. The crumpled body fell underneath a tire as Lay spun the wheel. It'd have been a high-five moment, but she ruined it when she slammed the brakes and backed up to drive over it again. She smiled through the passenger window, two thumbs raised high. That smartass probably waited until she could save the day. I patted down my body, searching for anything poking in the wrong direction. Bruised ribs, maybe cracked, but otherwise I'd survive. Our patient might not be so lucky if we didn't get him out of the war zone and into a hospital. "Man down!" I yelled. Lay jumped from the driver's seat and, in a well-rehearsed manner, had the gurney out of the back. We didn't have time to secure the patient. Based on the bruising, he had internal bleeding. We skipped the collar. Lay raised the side of his body, and I slid the board under his back. We'd strap him in once we drove away. For now, we lifted, putting him on the gurney. "I've never seen him before," Lay said. "Me either." "Check the blood for acid." I appreciated the advice. Last time it had eaten through my pants and left a nasty scar on my thigh. We wheeled him to the ambulance, sliding him inside. I jumped in the back, and seconds later, Lay had us flying toward the hospital. I had the alligator clip on his finger as I grabbed the cuff for blood pressure. Supers with multiple limbs always posed a challenge, so it was down to picking the easiest arm to check his blood pressure. The monitor went to work, spitting out numbers. Hypoxic. That would explain the incoherent mumbles from the hero. The constant starts and stops didn't hinder me as I grabbed a needle and started an IV. The moment I hit a vein, I grabbed the tape from the bar, securing the line. Did he have a heart? Or multiple hearts? Sometimes I longed to work on humans and their predictable organ placement. I grabbed the scissors and pulled at the suit around his neck. When I couldn't pull it away from his body, I let out a low growl. There were plenty of heroes with suits biologically attached to their bodies. It served as protection of their secret identity, but it made my life difficult. I hated difficult. As I applied the leads to his body, I hoped I could get a reading. "Damn it," I mumbled. The numbers didn't indicate Cushing's triad. It meant the alien's physiology didn't align with my equipment. Unlike other trucks, we had tech on board supplied from the heroes themselves. I reached for the cubby with the machinist's nanobots. I hated relying on their tech, but when conventional methods failed... "It is time." I nearly jumped at the sound of the alien's voice. The deep bass almost sounded musical. Time for what? It was a stupid question. I already knew the answer. The patient verbally acknowledged that he was ready to die. We only had minutes until we reached the hospital. As long as he was talking, he wasn't dead, and everybody knew heroes liked a good monologue. Simple superhero logic. "There is a darkness coming," he muttered. His hand reached out, all 6 fingers extended in my direction. For all the tools at my disposal, none of them could diagnose the problem. Alien physiology be damned. I wasn't in the mood to lose another patient. I grabbed his hand. His fingers wrapped about my knuckles, stronger than should be logical. He pulled me in close, his thin lips moving but not making a sound. He finally spoke in a whisper. "It is you." Me? Delirium set in. Everything out of his mouth from this point on would be the result of his brain coping with his impending death. "I can protect you from the darkness." His eyes narrowed, intensifying as he pulled my hand to his chest. The EKG slowed, his heart rate dropping. I tried to pull free, to get to the equipment, but he held fast. I tugged again, but his grip was absolute. At any second, I knew he was going to box. "It comes." The suit under my hand separated, pulling away like oil and water. His skin underneath was covered in scars, an almost tribal pattern similar to Pe'a tattoos. They flared, burning away his suit until his entire body glowed. "You okay back there?" Lei asked while swerving around a corner.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?